of the Western Governors Association and a leader of the U.S. Climate Alliance. Aloha, Governor. Thank you for joining us. And next, we welcome Mayor Jackie Biskupski of Salt Lake City, Utah. Mayor Biskupski started her political career when she was elected to a seat in the Utah House of Representatives in 1998. She served 13 years in the state legislature and was elected Salt Lake City's 35th mayor in 2015. During her time in office, she has had a strong focus on climate change and clean energy, pledging to power the city with 100% clean energy by 2030. She's currently the chair of the U.S. Conference of Mayors Alliance for a Sustainable Future and co-chair of the Sierra Club's Mayors for 100% Clean Energy. Please welcome Mayor Biskupski. And finally, we are going to welcome back up our Hawaii Mayor, Honolulu Mayor Kirk Caldwell, who, as you know, has made climate resilience a priority for his second term. He's been a leader for Hawaii's environment for years, starting when he served as a representative for the Manoa District in Hawaii State House. If you haven't had an opportunity yet to meet him, he encourages you to stay for the reception after the panel so he can get a chance to personally thank you for this summit. How about a round of applause and aloha for our panelists?
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everybody. And I'm just delighted to be up here today and inspired by all of you and all the wonderful panel discussions we've had. Today, we really kicked off the morning with the Mayor Caldwell telling us this is about vision and unity and connection, and Mayor Garcetti challenging us and actually noting that cities are really laboratories for innovation. The panel on resilience really showed us and risks that we need to increase our risk awareness and education. We heard from Kavika and youth leaders about the need to engage local communities. And of course, inspired by Nainoa, really talking about that effort and that kako work that we all need to do together, which I think is a great segue to our final panel for today, the powerful climate partnerships, local, state, federal, and international. And we're going to actually hit on all of these because our leaders up here on the stage with us are actually operating successfully in all of those places. My first job out of college, I admit, was working for a mayor, and then I spent other years working at the federal level on climate and energy policy. And the context I bring is that the soulless feeling you feel after negotiating a high-level climate negotiation or the sustainable development goals at that macro level, you are left wondering, will this ever be implemented? Until the next negotiation, when we spend 3 weeks together in a room negotiating 3 words. But today I'm inspired because you really know that the rubber hits the road at the local level, and everybody here, particular leaders here today, are doing everything they can to make sure that we meet those commitments. I wanted to start with our hosts, Governor Ige, Mayor Caldwell. You have shown tremendous leadership with the different climate and energy goals and really showing the world. And I would say, if you observe the two of you together, there's a pretty good synergy, and that you agree on a lot of things. And so this isn't always the case with cities operating in that state context. Could you share with us some of your experiences on times where the city and state relationship worked well to get climate policy implemented, and sometimes when it was more difficult? Governor, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Aloha. Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I would want to start, and I think Kurt can add. We're fortunate because of our community. I do believe as an island community, we get it, that what we do impacts our neighbors. I think it's a gift from the peoples of the First Nation in Hawaii. More than 1,000 years ago, Hawaii was a thriving community of more than 1 million people, and it was totally self-reliant. So they generated 100% clean renewable energy because we didn't ship oil in from other places, and other things like that. So I do think that the core values of our community are reflected in climate change and resilience. We understand that we have to depend on each other. We understand that what we do impacts our neighbors, so we need to be aware of that. And I do think that it's easier here in the islands. We don't have so many counties, and I know that Mayor Victorino from Maui, and I saw Mayor Kawakami from Kauai. My very first term here in the islands, we had the busiest hurricane season ever on record. We had 22 named storms. We had a period of time where we had 3 Category 5 hurricanes surrounding the Hawaiian Islands. And all of the mayors and I are on the conference call each and every day talking through what that happens. It builds communities in those most difficult times, but it does create a framework for understanding that when we all work together, we can do great things. And so I do think that it's a gift from the peoples of the First Nation, but it's really carried and reflected in the core values of our community, believing in community and wanting to reinvest so that we can leave a better Hawaii to the next generation.
Well, I want to thank the governor for his comments. I also want to thank, Celeste. She worked for a great mayor in New York City, and she went on to work for our President Barack Obama. And then after the election, the very sad election, she came home, and we're lucky to have her back here with all the talent she learned up in America that we can now learn from here. When I was listening to Governor Ige, historically, the mayor of the city and county of Honolulu would run against the governor of the state of Hawaii because the mayor wanted to be the governor, and that's been going on for decades. And I like being mayor, and I love Governor Ige being governor. And we work very well together. And I'm proud of Governor Ige for a lot of different reasons, but if you spend time here, you'll see a style of leadership that reflects this place. It's a very quiet type of leadership. There's real strength, but he's never going to say, look what I've done. It's a little bit Asian, and it's a little bit, I think, Hawaiian. But it's true leadership. I'm also proud of the fact you're looking at history here. He's the first Okinawan to serve as governor of any state in our nation. He's half Okinawa. He's also half Japanese. Okinawa used to be a separate country till it was brought into part of Japan a long time ago. And he's the second Japanese-American governor in the history of the United States. The first was Governor Ariyoshi, who appointed Governor Ige to his position in the State House many, many years ago. And I brag about it because it shows the great diversity that we have. But as the governor mentioned, we work very closely together on issues of climate change. And he showed real leadership when the President of the United States said we're pulling out of the Paris Accord, and I'm still hopeful that it doesn't happen until after the next election, and hopefully there'll be someone who will say we're not stepping out. And debates are going on that will help determine, I think, some of that. But he stepped up immediately, reached out to all the mayors, all 4 mayors, and said, are you in with the state? And we all showed up at the Capitol, our beautiful, unique state Capitol building, and we signed on. And we've made pledges since then, unified pledges, by 2035, all public vehicles, all public fleet vehicles would be clean energy, and by 2045, all vehicles. And there's been no debate, no having to argue about this. We're on board 100%. And then we continue to talk about other initiatives, some that we're going to be announcing very shortly, that I think are going to show more dramatic action being taken by the city and county of Honolulu, our sister counties, and the state of Hawaii.
Thanks, Mayor Caldwell. And we're really delighted to have our other mayors here with us today from Hawaii. Mayor Biskupski.
Can I interrupt one? You mentioned another mayor. She just came in. She's the mayor of Gary, Indiana. I don't know if she's here. Mayor Freeman Wilson, is she in? She's outside. Anyway, she comes, if you could let us know. She's an awesome person and a leader who's going to go on to do great things in the city of Chicago in the future. But anyway, sorry for cutting in. Celeste, go ahead.
Fine. I just am observing this great synergy between our mayor and our governor here, and really able to get things done with these political commitments. That's not always the case. And Mayor, could you share with us a little bit of how are you able to really achieve your ambitious climate goals despite there not always being that alignment?
Sure. Well, I think part of it is just listening to the people, because the majority of people in the state of Utah can't breathe. It's a real problem. If you live along the Wasatch Front and in our corridor at all, there is dozens of days where the air quality is extremely poor, and that is being driven by our local economy and the way our mountains are set up on both sides of the corridor. So poor air gets trapped and then we can't breathe, and it's the number one issue. It's been the number one issue for a very long time. Even though it's been the number one issue, we as a state are still consumed by this idea that we have to pull every last fossil fuel out of the ground. And as a city, we are leading for change, and we love to lead as a city. We love it. And we know that it's not always popular with the state. But we also know how to coalition build, and we know how to bring partners in and who to bring in. And so we've brought other communities into the fold to go 100% renewable right along with Salt Lake City. When we pledged to go 100% renewable, we were the 16th city in 2016. Now there are over 100 of us going 100% renewable, which is really remarkable. We've come a long way as cities and communities, and several of those are in Salt Lake's neighborhood. We're part of Utah. But we also, when I came into office, I had a very unique opportunity to broker my agreement with my energy provider. And luckily, there was a new leader just come in during my campaign into Rocky Mountain Power. And I always say that for the women sitting in this room, you need to understand the Mother Earth is crying. And we, as ladies, are used to hearing that call. We need to heed the call and lead. I am very grateful to all the men in this room, including Mayor Caldwell, who are doing this work. But absolutely more women need to be leading at this time. So the good fortune of the new CEO at Rocky Mountain Power afforded me a conversation that led to a 6-month negotiation over our utility agreement, and that franchise agreement is what has been the roadmap for us. And we did a 5-year franchise agreement intentionally so we could hold each other accountable on going 100% renewable and what the city's role was and what their role would be. But we also passed our legislation this year. We had to get legislation passed this year that would allow for an entire community to opt in to 100% renewable all at once. And then if you, the consumer, wanted to opt out, we have to provide you multiple opportunities and give you information about how to get out and go back to coal or oil or whatever it is. And we were successful because we kept our technical partners in the room, holding the community leaders accountable, but also holding Rocky Mountain Power accountable to what is real and what would actually work and what had to be left in the bill to ensure we could make progress. So that is a big tool, knowing who needs to be in the room and when, in order for you to really affect change in a state where maybe your governor does not agree with you on the trajectory of cleaning up the world we live in today.
Thank you. That's really fascinating. So knowing who needs to be in the room, listening, but I detect a little bit of behavioral economics in there as well, right? Got to opt back into dirty. Pretty cool. Well, we'll come back to that
Yeah,
a little bit later because there's sort of an international component to that as well.
Yeah.
Governor Ige, let me turn back to you. You've been a real leader in the U.S. Climate Alliance, and that's this group of 24 governors that have actually committed to achieving the Paris Agreement, despite what happens or may not happen at the federal level. Can you tell us a little bit about this bipartisan effort, but with a view to maybe share with our mayors here and the climate mayors that as of lunch, before lunch included 425 mayors, and after lunch 426. So this is momentum. Imua, can you share a little bit about your experience?
Certainly. I think just a comment about the National Governors Association and the Western Governors Association. It really is a bipartisan organizations that really allow us to share common challenges, solutions that work, and really talk about priorities that we know affect our neighboring states. So certainly when there was a discussion about the federal government backing out of the Paris Climate Agreement, several of our governors said that we can't let that happen. I mean, the United States have been at the forefront of virtually every single environmental issue, was definitely the force to make the Paris Agreement finally happen in a way that I think we all agree is so amazing for a lot of different reasons. And we knew that we couldn't just sit idle. It was time for people in this country to step forward. And we felt that governors, like cities, I guess, are laboratories of democracy. And at least those that were of like mind would step forward. And we did want to not make it a partisan issue. We wanted it to be a nonpartisan. So we approached and talked with many governors of all parties. We talked to the governor in Utah, and he declined. But the U.S. Climate Alliance is now 24 states. It represents 55% of the people in America. It represents $11 trillion in economic activity. We would be the third largest country in the world, beside China and the US, I mean, economically. So we recognize that we could be a force to really make a commitment regardless of what the federal government was going to say. We wanted to let the world know that America still cared about climate change, and we wanted to make sure that we could, on behalf of all of the citizens in our state, stand up and be counted and continue to advocate and make sure that the rest of the world knew that the United States of America will not back down from their commitment for leading on this issue.
Thank you for calling my governor.
And you know, I think despite this challenge at the federal level, there are bright spots, still opportunities, windows to work with federal government, and this is almost necessary, right, to look at different funding opportunities. Let me hand it back over to our mayors and say, what are the ways that you guys are identifying federal opportunities to support your climate goals and even effectively using our congressional delegations to do that?
Sure. So one of the things we have done, we took a delegation back to Washington, D.C. Mayor Benjamin was with me, and we took some other mayors with us. And we testified before Congress on increasing funds for CMAQ, which is our air quality funding program, but also the energy and efficiency conservation block grant funds. Those are funds that all of our communities have the opportunity to draw down and help us make progress. But the number one thing that I believe that the federal government could be doing is passing the legislation on carbon pricing. I'm running a resolution during the conference and hoping that the majority of us will vote for that. But that work needs to happen. We need to get that underway. That money that would come from that fee comes back into our communities, and that is, again, another way for us to make progress. in the work that we do.
So I wanted to give a specific example and maybe go a little broader. So we're in the Ahupua'a of Waikiki, as I mentioned, in Manoa Valley. Recently, our congressional delegation was very successful in getting the state of Hawaii and the city and county of Honolulu $348 million for a flood mitigation and hazard project that would protect Waikiki, which is our main visitor destination, but also the valley of Manoa, the Pololo Valley, and Makiki from flooding. We had a major flood in 2004 that wiped out this campus and caused almost $100 million in damage. So we have the money from the federal government, but they need a local match. So Governor Ige has stepped up and says the state will contribute $125 million, and then the city and county of Honolulu will be the lead sponsor of the project. We'll commit to O&M, Operation Maintenance Project Forever, working with the Army Corps of Engineers. Now that is an example of working federal. Our federal delegation got the money. The state is giving us some of the money, and the city is going to be the sponsor of the project. And it's about resilience, really, and how do we continue to have a thriving visitor industry and also make sure our neighborhoods in these valleys are safe from flooding that is occurring much more often through these rain bombs that we talked about. Another one is, military is our second largest industry. Visitor industry is the largest at about $16 billion, $17 billion, something like that, and the military is at 14. And I've been sitting down with people at Pearl Harbor. They are looking, they have a mandate to become 100% renewable at Pearl Harbor. They want to work with us. But the good news is, should it be hit by a Category 5 hurricane, Kauai got a Category 4 that wiped them out. We could go to Pearl Harbor and plug into their grid and help each other. So that's another example on a federal level, working with the military. And of course, we'd be working with the state also. So those are just two very precise examples of how we are working together.
And I just would want to add that that I, on behalf of the state of Hawaii, signed an MOU with the U.S. Navy to work on energy efficiency and clean energy projects here in the islands. And we signed a similar agreement on behalf of the state and the U.S. Army for the Army installations here on the island. And so clearly we are aligned at federal, state, and county levels to really move the climate agenda forward.
Oh, and thank you very much for those examples. And I think earlier today we were educating our colleagues on Mauka to Makai and going back to that project to increase risk and reduce risk and increase resilience in the watershed actually involves all of the communities in the watershed and public and private sector partners as well. So that's an incredible example. But the other thing that strikes me as I look at our panel is that this is a truly global challenge. Climate change is a global challenge. Science is telling us we have a 10-year window to actually drastically change behavior across every sector of society to avoid the most catastrophic impacts of climate change. And yet it also seems to be a strange time where multilateral processes are being led by local leaders. We have the United Nations coming here and looking for help, convening in cities. And there's these models. You have wonderful examples of C40, U.S. Climate Alliance, the climate mayors. Could you talk a little bit, and Governor Ige, maybe I'll start with you, about how what is happening here locally is actually driving the global agenda on climate, on sustainable development?
Certainly the Aloha Plus Challenge with all of the mayors joined us really was our commitment to really have a dashboard so we can see real progress in critical areas that were important to taking care of our environment. Certainly, I've been able to, as chair of Western Governors, look at different ways to put biosecurity and invasive species on the agenda. We know that it's related and important, especially here in the islands. But I do see the opportunities that these national organizations provide for us for collaborating and sharing information. I like to take credit. I know that Hawaii was the first state to commit to 100% clean renewable energy for electricity. I like to take, or we like to, in the islands, like to take credit for California because they definitely was stalking us, and part of the conversation with the U.S. Climate Alliance, I had the chance to speak with Governor Brown, and he was convinced that they were going to be first, and, he was talking with his staff about being, the first state to commit to clean renewable energy, and I had to say, excuse me, Governor, we did it 3 years ago. So you're playing for second place, it's not, and he kind of looked at his staff and he said, second? You mean we're not going to be first? But I can tell you that other states are really looking at following the lead now. I know that New Mexico is very active and had legislation. I know that there are other states that are following. So I do think that the other governors in the U.S. Climate Alliance basically said, look, the world needs leadership at this time. We need to stay committed. And we know, I think that, our commitment comes from the place. And, I'm glad you guys had a chance to hear Nainoa Thompson talk today. It's really about getting everybody to do their part, to take kuleana, to say, yes, I can depend on somebody else taking action, but what is it that I can do? What is it that I can do to reduce greenhouse gases? What can I do to increase carbon capture? What can I do to really head off this catastrophe that will happen unless each and every one of us takes it up as our opportunity to do something now, not next year or the year after that?
Thank you very much, Governor, for the inspiration. Please, Mayor.
Yeah, so, going back to your comment about the United Nations, the United Nations will be convening their 68th NGO conference in Salt Lake City in August of this year. And in part because of the work that we are doing. And I had an opportunity to take a delegation back to the UN and make a pitch for why we should have a conversation about what it means to build sustainable cities and communities in Salt Lake City and the value of that. And so they are coming to cities. They do want to have these conversations in your local neighborhoods to really dialogue around what is it that is happening in the United States that you can share with us about the work. And so we will have a tremendous opportunity to share the conversation about the fact that the U.S. is still in when it comes to the Paris Climate Agreement and the tremendous progress being made by mayors and governors who are insightful and understand the role that we all need to be playing. So I'm very much looking forward to that conversation and the outcome of that, going back to the United Nations for them to actually vote on whether to act on our outcomes from that conference.
Thank you so much. And ultimately, it's going to have to be that roll-up of local government to a national commitment to see if we're achieving our sustainable development goals and the Paris commitment. Mayor, let's give you the last word on that, please.
So, Governor Ige mentioned the Aloha Plus Challenge, which is really, and Celeste has a big part of putting that whole thing together, Hawaii Green Growth and Aloha Plus Challenge, but it's based on the Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations came up to tackle climate change. So she's brought it home to a local level. All four mayors, Mayor Victorino, Mayor Kawakami, Mayor Caldwell, and Mayor Kim of the island of Hawaii have all signed on along with the governor. So we're in tune with the United Nations. And our federal government is out. But we're in, and we're talking directly at the international level from a very local level to the highest level. And we're talking to other nations that are part of the United Nations who have signed on. I mean, I think in that way it says a lot about there is hope here. You may not have a federal government engaged, but you still have the engagement and the goals and standards. And so, for example, I was up in Chicago the other week for the Pritzker Forum on Cities, and I met Penny, I can't say her last name, from New York City, who works a lot with the United Nations, and said, do you want to do the voluntary local review? And I told Celeste, I'm on board. The city and county of Hawaii wants to do that. But what it means is they're going to basically audit, are we actually following the Sustainable Development Goals? And think about it, if all of us do that, we are going to be a better world. And we don't need the federal government. They can get out of the way and let the mayors and the governors do what they need to do to make us a better place. So just wanted to mention that. Now, I hope we do have a federal government will align with all of us too in a not too distant future.
Thank you. I think they'll
Thanks.
come along eventually. And you have the community support behind that. And I just wanted the tremendous leadership to be leading and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and climate goals. I think we're going to go directly to Mentee. I think you know the drill. And we're going to hold any other questions until after the panel in the interest of time. So I'm going to read this out loud. For on-the-ground climate action, my most successful partnerships have been with A, another city, B, multiple cities in my region, my state, or D, none of the above. And these are going to come up. Maybe you can be thinking about the questions you want to ask our panelists after the panel. So, you see multiple cities in my region leading here, which just shows really the importance of this regional approach and inspiring action. And there's some really exciting platforms that we haven't discussed out there today that is doing that. All right. Just taking I think we're still voting? Okay, so there's a clear winner here. I hope you bet your money appropriately on these. Oh, wait. Is this on the public record? Okay. I'm not sure how quickly, in the interest of time, we can move to our next question once this settles down. I'm just going to tell you in advance so you can think about it. So the second question will be actually quite interesting, given the conversation we had. What federal support would be most helpful in your city? A, climate science impacts. B, renewable energy deployment. C, smart grid investments. Or D, zero carbon transportation. I think we have an E and an F here too, excuse me. So we have more options. E, building decarbonization. And F is workforce training. Okay, let's add another one. This is for our conference organizers, G, re-engaging. And this is interesting as well. So, this is coming in for the zero carbon transportation. I've just been hearing all day about the importance of transportation, and including at the city level and at the state level, right, Governor? This is really something that's it's a challenge, but can be a kako thing as we continue to practice our Hawaiian words. Okay, well, I'm not going to try to summarize this. I think we're going to just please join me in thanking our panelists for the leadership that they're showing across. And with that, I think we'll exit and go to the next thing on the agenda. I think it's up to you, Mayor.